This is the story of a forest that became a furnace, where American Marines were forged into legend. A place where machine guns cut the air like lightning, where entire companies vanished in minutes, and where the Germans gave the US Marines a name whispered with fear, Teufelhunden, the Devil Dogs. The year was 1918 and Europe had become a graveyard of nations. For 4 brutal years, the First World War had chewed through millions of lives across muddy trenches stretching from the North Sea to Switzerland. Empires trembled, kingdoms cracked, and entire towns had vanished under artillery fire. But in early 1918, everything changed. The German army launched a massive offensive. The British lines folded. The French army struggled to hold, and for the first time, the enemy surged dangerously close to Paris. If Paris fell, the war would end, not with peace, but with German victory. And that was the moment the Americans arrived. Thousands of young US Marines marched toward the thunder of war, carrying rifles, bayonets, and a confidence that Europeans found almost reckless. Many of them had never left American soil before. Some had never even fired their rifles in combat. But within weeks, the world would know their name. And the story of that name begins in a quiet French forest called Belleau Wood. We dig no trenches. We hold here, Captain Lloyd W. Williams. The Marines were moving toward the front when scattered French soldiers rushed past them in retreat. Retreat! The Germans are coming! The French officers shouted. But Captain Lloyd W. Williams of the US Marines looked them dead in the eyes and said the words that would echo through history. Retreat, hell, we just got here. That single sentence became a declaration, not of bravery, but of identity. Because Belleau Wood wasn't just a battlefield. It was a test of grit, a test of will, a test of what it truly meant to be a United States Marine, the forest of death. Belleau Wood was not large, roughly a square mile, but it was a fortress built by nature. Dense trees, rocky ground, thick brush, and deep ravines gave German machine gunners perfect cover. The Germans had dug in for weeks, turning the forest into a labyrinth of trenches and camouflage positions. It was a killing ground. When American reconnaissance units approached the edge of the woods, they were greeted by the sound that became the soundtrack of World War I, the snarl of the German MG-08 machine gun. Firing hundreds of rounds per minute, its bullets shredded branches, shattered rocks, and tore apart anyone caught in the open. One Marine later wrote, "The air wasn't filled with bullets, and it was bullets." Yet into that storm the Marines advanced. SGT Major Dan Daly, "Do you want to live forever?" Among the men preparing to assault the woods was Sergeant Major Daniel Daly, already one of the most decorated Marines in history. Daly had survived the Boxer Rebellion, fought in Haiti, and earned 2 Medals of Honor. But nothing had prepared him for Belleau Wood. On June 6, 1918, as his Marines hesitated at the forest edge under a hurricane of machine gun fire, Daly stood tall and shouted the line that echoed across generations. "Come on, you sons of bitches, do you want to live forever?" It wasn't a question. It was a challenge. The Marines surged forward. What followed was slaughter. Dozens fell within seconds. Entire platoons disappeared behind curtains of gunfire. Bayonets snapped. Helmets flew. Men clawed at the earth for cover. But the Marines pressed into the forest inch by bloody inch. One Marine described it as hell but with trees. The Germans meet a new kind of enemies. The Marines fought deeper into the forest. German officers sent urgent messages up the chain of command. The Americans fight like wild men. But they weren't wild. They were disciplined, precise, determined beyond reason. When riflemen ran low on ammunition, they switched to bayonets and knives. When machine gunners fell, riflemen took their place. When leaders were killed, privates took command. The Germans had faced the British, the French, the Russians, but they had never seen soldiers who advanced through machine gun fire as if death was just another obstacle. A German report later stated, "The Americans do not retreat. They simply refuse to die." LT Clifton Cates, surrounded, bleeding, unbroken lieutenant. Clifton Cates, later to become commandant of the Marine Corps, was inside the forest when his unit was nearly wiped out. Surrounded, cut off, and low on ammunition, he crawled to a makeshift foxhole and scribbled a desperate note. "I have only 2 men left out of my company and 20 out of my battalion.
But we are holding.
But we are holding." He was covered in blood, some his, some not, but he refused to leave. When reinforcements finally reached him,
You're late.
they found Kate standing, his hands shaking, his uniform torn, but his rifle still in his grip. He looked at the arriving Marines and said, "You're late." Marines take the field with bayonets fixed. Belleau Wood changed tactics forever. When machine gun fire was too thick to shoot back, Marines charged with bayonets. No cover, no firing line, just cold steel. One survivor wrote. A German prisoner later recalled, "We feared their rifles less than the moment they fixed their bayonets. Their eyes changed." The Marines moved tree to tree, trench to trench, clearing dugouts in brutal hand-to-hand combat. Knives, rifle butts, grenades tossed into tunnels, bayonets piercing the dark. The forest became a carnage of smoke, splintered trees, and cries of war. 13 days of unimaginable fighting. The official record says Belleau Wood lasted 26 days. But the worst of it, the bloodiest, closest, most savage fighting, lasted for 13 straight days. Days when men didn't sleep, didn't eat, didn't speak. They only fought. One Marine described it. "We became animals, but animals with purpose." The final assault. July 1st, 1918. By July, the Germans were exhausted. Their ranks were shattered. Their machine gun nests were broken. But they refused to surrender the forest. The Marines prepared for one final assault. Artillery hammered the woods until the trees exploded like thunder. Marines fixed bayonets once again and stormed forward in a final wave. Hand-to-hand combat erupted at every bend. Grenades lit the dark. Branch by branch, trench by trench, they took the forest. And on June 26th, a Marine runner delivered the message heard around the world. Belleau Wood is now U.S. Marine Corps Wood. France renamed it Bois de la Brigade de Marine, the wood of the Marine Brigade. And the Germans gave the Marines a name they still carry with pride, Teufelhunden, the devil dogs. The legacy that still echoes Belleau Wood wasn't just a victory, it was a revelation. The United States was no longer a newcomer to world conflicts. The Marines were no longer a small naval infantry force, they were elite. They were feared, they were legend. One French general looked at the Marines and said, "These men are not regular soldiers, they are stormtroops." Today, the Marine Corps still honors Belleau Wood as the moment it became the world's premier fighting force. A forest turned them into fire, and a generation of young Americans carved their names into history. This was Belleau Wood. This was the birth of the Devil Dogs.